Hi, welcome everyone. You're joining us for the Theory You Around the World series, where we at Bidu invite remarkable practitioners to explore together how Theory U is practiced around the world in various countries and various fields. Today, we have the great privilege of hosting Vasco Gaspar from Portugal. Vasco is an author, public speaker, teacher of social presencing theater, the branch of Theory U that focuses on embodiment, and facilitator in the field of awareness-based human flourishing. Thank you for being with us today, Vasco.
Thank you both. It's an honor to be here. Thank you.
So I know your work includes various frameworks, and today we'd love to focus on Theory U. My first question is, how did you first come across it, and what was it about this approach that really spoke to you or made you want to go deeper and integrate it into your work?
Oh, thank you. That's such a simple question, and probably I will have a long answer. I discovered Theory U in 2007. I think it was 2007, when I was very much interested on the topic of presence and awareness. And I remember after reading some books, and one of them was A New World from Eckhart Tolle, it opened me a possibility to live in the world from a different place than just the mind, than just being downloading. And that led me to search other books, and I found a book called Presence, written by Otto Scharmer with Peter Senge, Joseph Jaworski, and Betty Sue Flowers. I think maybe I'm missing someone. And then from that book, I read Theory U, the 800 pages thick book. And it was kind of a recognition when I was reading that book. And there was something in me that was recognizing in those words something that my inner system already knew. So Otto was putting into words and in a framework, very elegant and complex sometimes, but very simple, at least for me to understand. And there was something in me resonating with these words and this approach of the you, and especially this idea of living from the emerging future, this possibility that we can somehow tap into something larger than ourselves, that some intelligence or some wisdom or some, we might call it different things, but this possibility of tapping into a larger wisdom and to be an instrument, at least that's the way I interpreted that, be an instrument, a vehicle to be of service of that. As I think it was Lord Krishna or Juna, I don't remember. Actually, I'm not going to say the sentence because I might put it completely out of the place. So, but being a whole in God's flute, basically. How can I be a whole in God's flute? How can I be an instrument? So Otto, what I loved in 2007, it gave a theoretical framework for something that until then was very much spiritual for me. It gave like a cognitive, like simple, at least for me, elegant framework. So that, yes, long answer for your question. Yeah, around 2007. Yeah.
Maybe the sentence you refer to is the sentence that we found in the book that you're just writing in these days. I read the sentence. What do the change? The question, what do I want from life, to the question, what does life want from me?
Exactly.
This is the way you phrase it, and I think it relates to what you just shared with us now. So we wanted, if it's fine for you to share with us a little deeper what this shift meant for you personally. How did it affect your work, your life? This shift
Yeah.
position.
Yeah, it actually changed everything. So,
Maybe you have any examples, like
yeah,
even tiny
yeah,
concrete examples that
yeah.
can give us some sense.
I can give. So, but let me just, so that sentence of don't ask what you want from life, ask instead what is life wanting from you or something. It's a sentence that I read from Eckhart Tolle. So that had put me on that quest that led me to discover Otto's work. But then I was still holding a question. So one thing is, okay, I understand this possibility, but then how? How can I live from that place? And then I discovered another practice called heartfulness, which is a practice that comes from Raja Yoga to really help me connect to source within, and to, from within that connection with source, to connect with that larger something. So giving examples, for instance, I remember 1 week after starting this practice of heartfulness, I was holding a question, and the question was, so I was reading a lot of things on well-being, integral well-being, psychological well-being, and so on. And I was reading so many books and theories and things, and I didn't have how can I put all of these things together? And after 1 week of starting that practice, I remember I arrived at my office. I was working as a business consultant, like using my tie and my suit and so which is kind of past life now. So I arrived like 7:30 in the morning, early to do my meditation. And during the meditation, I saw very like a faint something of a possibility of a tool to integrate all these different things. So after the meditation, I kind of opened my eyes and I did a little draft. So I crystallized something. So, and from that moment on, actually coming back to your question, how these things change. So everything started changing the moment I started to connect within, and from that place starting to access some possibilities or intuitions, or very subtle, very almost like, as Steven Spielberg said it, like the heart never shouts, always whispers. It's very difficult to hear, always whispers. But if we train ourselves to listen to the heart with, and practices, for instance, such as social presencing theater, heartfulness, they somehow, at least for me, attune that capacity to listen to something larger. And for instance, this is my, every time I do a practice, I write in my notes. So this is my 25th little journal, and all the ideas, all the ideas for projects, for programs, for keynotes, for solving problems in my day-to-day life, they normally come in that space of the bottom of the U that Otto points to, that possibility of stopping, letting retreat, letting go, and then from that space letting come something. And that letting come many times again is very faint. It's like a little I have an intuition that if I do this something will take me to the next step. Or sometimes it's very clear, sometimes also like aha moment, oh, I know now. So I write those things, like kind of crystallize them, bring them, almost like bring them from the unmanifested realm that Joseph Jaworski also speaks about in his book Source, and many other authors and so on. So almost like tapping into this larger unmanifested field of possibilities and crystallize it in a little something, little form. And then from that little form, it's really about going up to you, prototyping, oh, let me try this. And many times doesn't work. It's not a magical, oh, now I have the possibility for solving everything. No, but it normally takes me a step further to something. And even if it's to a mistake, it's something that I will learn from, that will take me then to the next step. So again, coming back to your question, everything changed because, I don't know, some months later, I dropped my job to start following this, what is life wanting to live through me? And many times I'm lost, and I continue to be lost these days, but there's more peace around that now. Because before, the mind was always, there was a sense of being lost and the mind confused, and what should I do? And emotions of anxiety and discomfort. And now, even if that is present, there's a trust on something in the intelligence, this wisdom, this larger sanity that's inside me and around me, even if in the world sometimes doesn't look like that. Because if we open the news, and you know that, and we all know that, like if you open the news, there's so much suffering, so much disruption, so much, but at the same time, we don't know also what is good. We don't notice many times, because I know this is not true what I'm going to say in many parts of the world, but here, for instance, in the last, I don't know, 46 years, which is my age, no one tried to kill me, and don't notice that every day. it's not true again in many parts of the world. In many parts of the world, people, their lives are in risk. But here, we go to a workshop or to a coffee or to a restaurant, and we don't even notice that most people are doing their lives. They just want to be okay. They want to be with each other, be happy, follow their whatever. But that is not normally visible. Anyhow, I'm already rambling and going. Yeah, you asked me.
So I, so thank you. So this was amazing to hear. If we take this phrase of what do I want from life and what life wants from me, I think another way to put it is kind of the shift from ego to eco in many ways.
Yeah.
The theory you is all about. So you shared very vividly about how the work that it did for you. Can you give an example of how do you work with others to help them go through this shift?
Yeah.
And what is theory you offer in that sense? What have you found helpful in working with others to help them do this transition?
I think theory, you first of all, at least for me, it gives a simple, elegant framework that can help, again, at least for me, translate something that we somehow intuitively know, but sometimes you don't have language or a structure for. So I sense that for many people that I've been working, this framework, even if the framework is somehow hidden, imagine that I'm facilitating a program, but in my design, I always try to bring the you as somehow in the design, even if people never hear about theory U in a workshop, but it's there somehow informing, holding the whole thing. So I think one of the things, so first is this cognitive awareness, but then it goes deeper. And what I find it brings to people, it's first of all this possibility of expanding our awareness, of instead of just looking outside, to this possibility of oh, wait a minute, let me just suspend this autopilot mode and be more aware of myself, be more aware of my, almost like attuning my instruments of perception, and be more aware. And through different practices, and you know the practices, for instance, like dialogue or social presencing theater or 3D mapping, there's this expansion of awareness. So, and by expanding the awareness, we become more conscious of things that we were not conscious before. And that opens new possibilities. And those new possibilities can lead to new results that were not present in the beginning of, I don't know, a workshop or even a session one-on-one with a person. Like even if I'm doing I don't know, trauma work with one-on-one person, I always have a you in the back of my mind. And I want the person to, not I want because it's not, I go with the person, but there's a sense of bringing the person into a very deep place, connecting with many times a traumatic experience that is there conditioning the action in the beginning. But if the person expands the awareness and taps into that traumatic event, it's possible then from that space to not only through awareness, but many other ways to release that. And from that release, there's more space, there's more energy, there's more sanity. And from that sanity again, then there's an action that becomes, I don't know if it's possible to say more whole. Maybe, I don't know, sorry. And I'm not an English native speaker, so probably sometimes
We're not us.
I invent some words. So the word healing and whole, they have the same origin, like to become whole. Heal is to become whole. So what I sense in the project, so one of the projects we have is called Deep U, which brings different things together. So it uses the U as the framework, but it's very much applied to the individual and brings many of the practices of theory U to the nervous system. So seeing the nervous system as a system, autonomic nervous system in this case, then the mind as a system, then the social relationships that we have with others, like this social body, and then to connect with this larger system that we call life, or if you want to call it universe, God, field, whatever. So this larger thing, and from that journey, normally people at the end, they have a smile and a spark in their eyes and a sense of a possibility and a sense of Hmm. I don't know, hope. I think the word hope is coming, which is not true for everyone, of course, but in many, there's this sense of, there's some hope and some sense of agency. I can do something. Yeah.
I would like to ask you about the connection between this very deep inner work with people on their own connection with themselves. And you mentioned in like the few minutes that we had before we start recording, you mentioned working sometimes with thousands of people. So I want to ask you, how do you connect this very much inner, deep individual work with working with large group or with people living in large systems?
Yeah. I pray a lot for guidance.
What do you ask for?
I ask for divine guidance. Yeah. So yeah. So thank you for that question. Yeah. And normally I work with groups. Most of my work is with groups. And in one of the elements that is I find very useful to work with groups. So even if I'm working with a large group, I'm always attending the individual. I'm always speaking to the, or my intention or my agenda, let's call it like that, is to create a safe container for that group of people, and especially that individual. It can be, I don't know, hundreds of people. But how can I create a safe container, and with different practices and tools and frameworks and inspirations to, or entry points for, how can I find entry points for this person to connect with their innate basic sanity, this self with a capital S. And for some people that might be through a practice like meditation. For other people might be through dialogue, eyes to eyes, and going into a dialogue walk, or eyes to eyes looking at each other. It might be through the body, somatic practices such as social presencing theater. It might be through frameworks like IFS, internal family systems, which might bring a framework for some people to realize that it's normal to have multiple parts, and the mind is a system, or can be seen as a system, and that brings for many people just that notion, a sense of that I'm not as crazy as I thought. uh, so many different ingredients, and in, for instance, again, one thing I find very important working with groups, or or even just with individuals, is to work on the field. And I don't hear so many people speaking openly about that. But how can we work with the field, the collective field, even beforehand? Even 1 week before the group starts, how can I already be working with my intention energetically on the field, cleaning the field, making the field safe? And this enters in a topic that might bring us to an esoteric kind of, and many people find, oh, that's kind of bullshit what you're saying. And I understand that people might feel a little bit cautious or even cynical, because this is something that, I don't know, shamans, they know for I don't know, eons. And but not only shamans, for instance, Joseph Jaworski, from that is very much also on the origins of the work of the theory U with Otto. It was once I was having a session, and Jaworski was participating, and he said something that was, I find it so beautiful. He said, the most important thing before any work with a group, individual, a conversation, and a meeting, is to pour love into the field. Is to pour love into the field. And many of us, we don't know how to do that. How can I transmit love into the field? But that is possible, actually. It's possible that I connect with this larger something and to transmit that. And for instance, my tradition, Heart, was very much about that. But again, it for someone that is very cognitive and very much with a materialistic, deterministic mindset, it's very difficult to, what is that about transmission or the field or whatever? And I understand that. So that's why I always say, be a scientist, experiment, test it out. Try a group without this working on the field, and then try one working on the field, and compare. and it's different. And maybe it's just my belief, but I've been working with thousands of people, and actually, let me just tell you a story. Normally, I work with a field before a group. I imagine like go to a company teaching some program, and normally I work like, I don't know, 1 week before I start working, bringing in my morning meditation, bringing that group into my awareness, almost like setting the intention to be of service to this group. May I be of service? Asking, anyhow, I have my own rituals and so on, which are kind of not secret, but sacred for me. And one day I remember I was having a group with 40 people in a company. And the day before, I remember, oh, I forgot to work on the field. So I went and I sat in meditation. I started working on the field. And the funny thing was that the next day I came to the room. And one of the things I always ask is for only the right people to be in the room, only the right people that are aligned with the higher intention to be on the room, and all the others somehow not to be there. Somehow, I don't know, they have they missed the train or whatever. And in this day, I just work on the field on that day, and 20 people missed it. So half of the group didn't show up, which this was, I don't know, like the 20th group in that company. And all the groups, of course, there's always people that miss, like 3 or 4 in 40. That's kind of normal. But 20, like 50% of people not coming, not showing up. For me, it was, again, might just be a coincidence, might just be a funny coincidence. But I've been noticing this over and over and over again. And just to finish this, there's a very nice book called The Living Classroom from, I think it's Richard Bage, the name. He's an academic in the religious studies. I don't remember the university. And he has this book, The Living Classroom, where he speaks very much about this notion of a collective field and how to work with that. Same as other people like Rupert Sheldrake also speaks about, and so on. Anyhow, again, I'm probably going out of the topic, but this is something I'm very much enthusiastic about, the invisible.
I think it'll be interesting to delve deeper into what you mentioned about how a lot of this work, it came right at the beginning that you said, Otto brought something that's very spiritual, again, gave it a kind of like scientific framework. And now it came up again, right? How people can be very cynical to what the theory offers. So in the draft of your manuscript, you also talk about the ability to translate intuition into action as something that is very unique to the quality of theory U. And we find in our own work that that's often a challenge. So many of us that were brought up in a much more logical, Western, rational paradigm have often struggled to trust our intuitions and rely on them as a basis for action, especially in organizational or group or systemic contexts. How do you work with that?
It's a challenge. It's a real challenge because, as you said, in the West, we are not trained. We are very much trained to muscle the mind and to believe the mind. And as Einstein said, I think it was Einstein said that we make a confusion between the master and the servant, and the master is the intuition, and I believe that the seat is in the heart, and the mind is the servant. But in our society, we put it the other way around. We put the master as the mind, which is beautiful. The mind is amazing. Nothing wrong with the mind. To plan, to organize, to shape, and so on. And again, for instance, artificial intelligence is a way to really put that on steroids, like the mind. But how to connect with that deeper space? And that's a challenge. And I fully agree with you. And that's why I believe it's important to create safe containers, and even to address imagine that the other day I had an insight. So in IFS, do you know IFS, Internal Family Systems? Is it a framework? So in IFS, there's this notion that we have multiple parts in our mind, like a system. And some parts of us were wounded. We call it exiles. In a system, bigger system as theory U, we speak about the marginalized, right? So it's kind of the same, but inside exiles. So some parts that we don't want to touch. And then there's the protective system, like the parts of us that are proactively making sure that we don't tap that. or reactively taking us, distracting us, and so on. And the other day I had an insight, which was the voices that Otto speaks about. Like when we're going down the U, there's the voice of judgment, there's the voice of cynicism, there's the voice of fear. They are all proactive protectors somehow. And they are normal. And I believe that they need to be welcomed. They don't need to be suspended. Actually, they need to be listened to. We need to find ways to listen to, because their voices, they are bringing an important information about the system. They are protecting those people to tap into something that is painful. Like, for instance, cynicism, like the voice of cynicism. What does it point to? According to Otto, points to a closed heart. So if the heart is closed, why is that the case? It's not just, oh, let's just open the heart. If the heart is closed, it's probably because it was wounded. So if it was wounded, how can we create safety for that person to open the heart? And that might be through dialogue, might be through beauty, art, poetry, might be through movement, whatever. So, but that is the challenge as a facilitator, that we need to sense the field. And sometimes in a company, let's, again, coming, for instance, an organization, if everyone is in the mind, that's the entry point. I need to first deal with it or address that and imagine dialogues for the voice of cynicism to be heard, and the voice of fear, and the voice of judgment. And the absencing, I believe the other day, that was the insight, they are also protecting mechanisms, but they are reactive. They are what is in IFS called a firefighter, reactive. So the pain is touched, and then you yell and you blame and you bring aggression. Those are all protection mechanisms. And how can we, it's difficult, I don't have the answer, how can we create safe containers for that? And I believe you guys are doing that. You are creating safe containers for people that are very much polarized, and with reasons to be polarized in terms of the historical divisiveness and the aggression and violence. And I imagine you tell me, how do you do that? Because it's amazing how to bring people that have a lot of pain. It's very painful. And to be with that, to be with the pain. Because if we don't feel the pain, there's no healing. It's part of the journey.
Yeah. I want just to continue this part, and you mentioned before social presencing theater and working with the body and with embodiment and intuition. And I want to ask you, and you mentioned working with art, different kind of arts, that these are kind of practices that helps people to feel confident and to relate to themselves. Although we appreciate very much the value of working with SPT, it fascinates us, and from our experience, it is very valuable. But in a society like a typical Western society, embodiment kind of work, different kind of embodiment kinds of work, including SPT, is not very common. It's not very familiar to people. I think in the field of therapy, this field is very much open to these practices, but the social and fields of organization is very much hesitating, jumping into this kind of work. Maybe you can share with us some of the values that you experience using these practices, and also from your experience, what do you do to make to open even little doors for people to be maybe courage enough to try or confident enough to try? Yeah. How do you make it more accessible?
Yeah, that's a huge thing. And yeah, so it's not easy to bring the topic of the body into a world or a context where people are very much in the cognitive, conceptual, and that sometimes they are there for a good reason. Again, and if you come back to trauma, many people, they escape to the mind because emotions happen in the body, And if you feel emotion, and many times you have people that are brilliant, I don't know, a 50-year-old person that is brilliant cognitively in an emotional body of a 6-year-old, because they actually many times became brilliant because of it was too painful to be in the body, and so if you are in a context where you invite people to come to the body, many of them might not want to go there because they probably running from that space for all their lives. They don't want to go there, right? So how to create that possibility? So I think one thing is to be creative and again, for me, all comes back to safety, the safe container. So if people trust you, which takes time, of course, it's of course much easier than starting a workshop and then okay, just go everyone to the floor and just and just move your body or whatever. Sometimes it works. It might work if you sense that the group is open to that. Sometimes you need to bring it as a icebreaker. Let's do an icebreaker. And everyone, hey, icebreaker. And then they play. Let's do a duet, like an icebreaker. And that's how to have a dialogue without words. So we need to be creative. And if we use the language of the autonomic nervous system, for me, it's very useful, the framework of polyvagal theory. Because one thing is context. So the importance of context. Why are we going to do this crazy, weird stuff with the body? So, right? People, for them to know, why am I going to do this duet or this 4D mapping or whatever? So the importance to even, and if you say, we're going to do this now, something that might bring a lot of discomfort for some of you. And we're going to into a territory of the unknown for many of you, which is the body and not verbal. So framing, like what is the context? Why are we going to do this? I think that's super important. An open space for a second thing, which the nervous system very much needs, which is choice. Giving the choice not to do it. For instance, in the DPU workshop that we have, for instance, in one of the versions we have is for groups of 100 people, and in multicultural. So last edition was in India. It was 15 cultures. Some people were like 15 years old. The oldest one was 85 years old. Like a lot of diversity. And I know that in some cultures, inviting people to the body is not something okay, and I need to respect that as well. So what was the solution? We were in a part of the program that we were addressing the social body and how to use the social body, for instance, to get more awareness about a system. So we gave them the possibility. One, and they could choose. Option one, you can come into this experience now, which is embodied, and it might be challenging for some of you, and it's also might be a possibility for you to train how to be in a challenging situation, because the world is more and more challenging. And if we train ourselves to be in a challenging situation, in a safe space, maybe when we are in real life, it's like giving them a, why are we going to do this weird stuff? Okay. And in front loading that they were going to be uncomfortable, but this is safe, and it's safe to stop. And if you don't want to do it, you just don't do it. So, and then also giving the possibility, if you don't want to do this still, because we understand, and you might just leave the room, or you might create some other groups that go outside and do a mini case clinic, an adjusted case clinic. So groups of 3, there's like a guidelines, adjusted case clinic, and they still are using a social body, but more in the dialogue space. And then when they meet them after that, imagine during the break, the ones that were in the room doing the stuff will say, that was so amazing. And the others get curious. And then sometimes they then want to do it afterwards. And, oh, can we try that the others did? But it takes time and patience. And sometimes it might not even be possible. And if the context is too toxic and too challenging, might not be the right tool to bring, and you might bring another thing that might be more adequate for that context. Like, well, let's instead do, I don't know, 3D mapping, or let's do a circle dialogue. But that's the challenge of the facilitator, is to tune into the field and sense and sometimes also be bold and, okay, I sense there's enough safety to go a step further. Yeah, anyhow, Daniel, you were about to say something.
Yeah, you mentioned, and I know you work internationally and doing some work in India. Can you give us shed some light on how this kind of work is received in Portugal?
Yeah. In Portugal, we tried to create a like a Presencing Institute chapter. I don't know if that's the right word, in Portugal in 2012. Me and some friends, and we are trying to, but then that didn't move forward. Then in 2015 or 14 with the ULab, I think it was around that time, the first ULab, it started to become people more aware of this this type of work, and especially after the wave of mindfulness coming into like the general public, people became more comfortable with practices of awareness and or awareness based, which is very much the case of Theory U, and more open, but it's still in many contexts a challenge. So we, for instance, giving an example, we had with a foundation here in Portugal, they give scholarships to brilliant students, university students, and we had two groups. One group, and again, coming back to the context, it's very in the choice, nervous system, context and choice. One of the groups, they were there. It was a 2-day Theory U, introduction to Theory U, and the intention was, how can we as fellows of this organization be a force for good? So that was kind of the framework, and getting them into a journey, and after the journey, getting some prototypes that they could work to address the challenges of social or spiritual or ecological challenges like the three divides. So that was the frame. We had two groups, more or less the same population. Exactly, university students, brilliant university students, and so on. The first group was amazing, incredible. 2 days of inspiration. And by the way, we only did a little SPT, more on the duet kind of, and it was amazing, beautiful. Second group was a disaster, completely disaster. What was the difference? The first group, they chose to be there. The organization, they opened and people needed to sign in. The second, the organization said, you need to be here because we want you as fellows to be part of this amazing experience that the other guy, we already tested, it's really nice. Now we want you to go through that.
Mhm.
And in a group of 80, it was 80 people, there was like, I don't know, 10 that they really didn't want to be there. And they were bright, amazing, bright, like mathematicians and I don't know, really amazing scientists, but they didn't want to be there. So they were sabotaging the whole thing, and it was so painful. So, so coming back to Portugal, your question, there's much more awareness to Theory U. People are more aware. It's something that is more, at least, of course, I'm my circle, so probably the population doesn't know about Theory U. But at least in some circles of people that especially that they are doing transformation, like transition networks and so on, this is very much Theory U. It's very much a framework that people know or heard about, or they did the ULab. So it's very much on the awareness of people already, I think. And so there's a lot of practitioners and respect for the theory U and the methodology. Yeah.
Want to ask you, we're like getting closer to the to end our conversation, and I want to ask you, is there something that we didn't ask you, but you want to tell us?
Yeah, thank you. That's a very nice, beautiful. I can tell you the first time I was mesmerized by SPT and what brought me to SPT. So I found myself in a retreat from Mind and Life called ASOL, Academy for Contemplative and Ethical Leadership. And there was many people there, Otto, Arawana, Peter Senge, and many, many others. And they had, it was a 7-day gathering about thinking of how can we bring to leadership, and especially this these tools of awareness, systemic awareness, and this bringing these generative social fields and so on. And I was very much at that time in my mind, which I still am. So I have very much, I tend to live in my mind a lot of time.
In your heart.
Yeah, in my heart, I cultivate every day, every morning. I cultivate going into the heart, and at the end of the day, I cultivate cleaning all the things I accumulate in my mind. Anyhow, but in that time, I was very much in my cognitive world, and there was this experience of trying SPT with Arowana and Otto, and also Adam. Adam at the time, he was still part of the team. So it was just 1 hour. There was not so much context. It was like a circle. We just came in like 40 people, and every day there was a 4D map. And and we were separated, and I was in the second day or third day, and I arrived the room, the like 40 people, and they said, we are going to map the American democracy. And I thought, oh, why did I came today? Because I don't understand anything about American democracy. So most of them were Americans. Probably they were very happy to map the American democracy, but I was not so much. So I don't want to explain what was going to happen and so on. People would get the roles, and the others would be citizens paying attention. The attention of the citizens is very important, blah, blah, blah. And then she said, if you feel attracted to if your body feels attracted to some role, you just stand, we put your role, and again, she explained, I'm not going to explain how to do a 4D map, you know that. But I was almost like falling asleep. I was not listening so much to the roles. And I didn't know what they mean, like the tea party. What the hell is the tea party? For a foreigner, I don't know what is a tea party. Like, I really thought it was people getting tea. My level of ignorance is amazing. So anyhow, so they were calling the roles like the government, the tea party, whatever. So, and then I heard that I want to saying something like rah, 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 rah. And I stood up. But actually, before that, one thing that is important, and I need to say that during the meditation, that I want to guide a little meditation before the ceremony, I started to have this thought, this image, very vivid, of someone running and then being killed and falling on the floor. So someone running in a dirt road, like being killed and falling on the floor. And I was wondering, why is this thought in my mind now? I didn't understand. Anyhow, then we started the ceremony. She was started to call the rolls, and then she said the roll, rah, 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 which I didn't heard, at least consciously. She called the roll, and I stood up. I didn't know why I stood up. My body stood up, and I was almost like there was a division. A part of me was kind of narrating and like, why are you standing up? You don't even know what you're going to play. But the body was standing up. So there was this, what is happening here? And then I don't want to put the roll.
The role.
And when she put the roll, I felt an unbearable pain. I collapsed into the floor. My body started shaking. I started crying and crying and crying and crying and crying. And I could not stop shaking. It was so painful, so painful. And then the movement started from sculpture 1 to sculpture 2. My body stopped shaking. I was still very tender. I stopped crying, but I was really, something was really moved inside. Only after I knew what I was playing. My role was future drone targets. People that were going to be killed by the American administration through drones in other countries. And I was getting that in my physical body. My mind didn't understand because I was shaking and crying, but something in me knew what was to be in that role. And from that moment on, something kind of really, what was here? And then I started I want to know more about this SPT business because my mind was really not able to make sense of that. And then, I did the basics, and then the whole thing. And that's why, by the way, and probably I don't want to, sorry, you're going to hear this, but my colleagues, but I normally do a 4D map with hidden roles. People don't know what they are playing. They just get a number. The citizens know. So we there's the role. Everyone knows the roles. Then the players leave. We put the roles in an order, invisible for the players. The players will not know, but the citizens know. And then they start coming into the map, number 1, and they find a place, a shape. But that way we make sure that the mind is not biased by what do I think the American administration will behave. No. And the amazing thing is that they will behave, at least I did it many times, they behave exactly as even anyhow, but this is for another conversation probably.
I want to ask you something practical, because you just mentioned something practical, very interesting, about these roles, hidden roles. So I want to ask you, if people do not know their roles, how do they offer themselves to roles? You just say, we have 10 roles. Who are the 10 people who wants to play role?
That's a good question. Normally, in this setting, and again, I always, or many times I ask the group what version they prefer, if they prefer the open roles or the hidden roles. If they prefer the hidden roles, what we do is that I guide a little meditation in the beginning and ask them how many of you feel that you want to be in the role of a player or a role of a citizen? And the ones that somehow feel in the role of a player, they stand up, and I invite them to go into another room to do a little 20-minute dance to tune, not to speak with each other, but to tune body mind, really tuning. And inside, the citizens, they know the roles. And normally we put the roles from, as we do in a 4D map, from the one that has most power in the system to the one that has least power. We follow exactly the same structure of a 4D map. But then when they come back, so then we call the citizens, the players, and then we just call number 1. And one of them will stand up and they find a place and they sit and it's really incredible. I don't know how to explain that, to be honest. From a rational scientific point of view, I have no idea. But something seems to, the field, if the field is there, and if we have capacity to tap into that and make it visible. And again, what is most important? It's not for me what happens in the 4D map or in the whatever. It's the dialogue that comes afterwards. Because even if it's a random kind of movement, the citizen will be projecting something into the field and say, oh, that's exactly how that guy, or the opposite. Oh, that doesn't seem like the guy normally behaves. So, but by verbalizing that, they are putting it into the field of dialogue. And that I feel that's what is important really is the sense making after. But again, and this is not the official version, so I'm being a bit rebel here. But I find it very interesting. And even recently I did one where they had no experience on Theory U or SPT. We just jumped directly into that because there was a lot of safety in that group. They didn't have any embodiment experience. They were very much in the head, actually. But the map was really mesmerizing, and they still today speak about what happened in the map, and it changed completely the direction of the workshop and the work that we were doing as a collective. Yeah. But maybe someone, try it out and be the scientist.
We will.
Let me know.
Thank you for sharing this.
Thank you. Thank you for asking.
Thank you very much, Vasco, for bringing so much wisdom of the heart and of the mind to our space. I'm so shaken by some of the stuff that you've brought. Extremely relevant to this time. So thank you very much for being with us.
Thank you so much for creating this space and for listening. And I hope I can honor what I've been receiving from so many beautiful teachers and masters. And so thank you.
Thank you very much.